Deathworlders to the Extreme by Aquastar Shark. Chapter 8. First meeting, but not really. The first time I saw one Shinto see face to face. Aizawa has fear. It was the sound of something collapsing that first shocked Shota out of his pain-filled daze. Although there hadn't been much collapsing since its ship had landed, it was not unexpected that something did eventually fall apart and make such a loud crash, and so sound didn't make too much of a reaction from Shota, who ignored the sound in favor of keeping still and preserving energy. It was 60 or so clicks later, however, when a crash much, much louder than earlier showed shooting up and sending a fresh wave of agony through his arm. Shota grit his fangs, shaken up by the debris collapsing. Shaken up by the debris collapsing. You haven't changed, have you, Shota? Gently sighing, Shota leaned back into his chair and forced his ears up from their previous pinned position so he could listen for any other crashes or signs of falling debris. It was a trick he developed to help cope with the sound of anything collapsing or falling apart, particularly ships where, while some might sit around and let themselves be surprised by the sudden collapse, he'd wait and expect it instead. It helped with his anxiety, particularly after the familiar sound of something bruising through tall foliage had Shota raising his head once again, as he took note of the step that accompanied such word sounds. He realized the nature of where he'd landed. A planet with life. I might just have a chance of surviving or even being discovered then. In a moment, the situation had been flipped. Once again, Shota found himself wrestling with the straps of his seat. Though this time, he was a little more coherent after being on world for more than a few ticks and was able to get unlatched with one paw. That's when things went wrong. Just as something, most likely the life form, pressed on the hatch of the hull, the emergency lights flicked on outside the ship, and once again Sam burst of adrenaline through Shota's system as he blindly searched for the shut-off. Just as he leaned against it to shut it off, one of the panels slid underfoot and set Shota tumbling to the floor. Unfortunately, with his injured arm landing on top of his body with reflectively little jostling, carefully rising, Shota stumbled awkwardly to the hatch to open it before pausing. Whatever it is, it may be aggressive. Raising his paw from where it was going to press the button to open the hatch, Shota tapped the hatch near an invisible window a couple times for opaque covering to go transparent, a function that fortunately still worked. The sight that met his eyes made him doubt his sanity for more than anything he'd ever experienced before, including the Blorbus incident, and he stared, frozen and disbelievingly, at the creature that stared back at him, purple eyes directly meeting his indefinite aggression, bipedal and mostly hairless with a pair of arms that ended in hands, with 5 appendages each, a head covered in purple mane, a color that likely indicated the poison like Nemuri's purple and red scales, and showed us own yellow markings. One mouth, one of a bump that assumed to be a snout, and 2 eyes. A faint glow accompanied his body along with the stripes across its form. This was the creature that Shota and the other heroes had gotten attacked trying to capture. The Deathworlder assumed to be from a Class 6 death world. A Deathworlder assumed to be an apex predator of its world. How is this possible? I'm feeling more than enough pain to know I'm awake, but this isn't possible. It was causing mayhem on Overhaul's ship. How is it on this planet? Shota's ears pinned to his head as the Death Worlder started tapping on the hatch. It's trying to get it. Flag! Shota ignored the agonies. He leapt from the window and lunged for his gun and darts. The tapping increased in violence, becoming louder as if the Death Worlder were trying to break its way in. Of course it is. I saw it. It saw you, and now it wants to eat you, idiot! Shota fumbled as he loaded the gun, the bangs from the Death Worlder overcoming his ears and senses as he lodged the darts into the barrel. The darkness was suffocating as Shota crouched behind his seat, ready to shoot the moment the Death Worlder got through the hatch. But the moment never came. Instead of the hatch being ripped off its hinges and the Death Worlder lunging for his throat, the bangs teared off instead of the sounding of crushing metal reach his ears. There was the sound of something gentle chattering. There was the sound of gentle chattering. Shota shifted in place, cursing when the movement jostled his arm. It doesn't sound too aggressive. Maybe it calmed down or lost interest in me? After a few clicks, even the chattering was gone, and after a few clicks more, the shuffling returned. Going away from the ship, Shota risked returning to the window again to find the Death Worlder staring at a large tree with thick branches that reached for the sky. Trees. What planet is this? Shota's head ached as he tried to remember what planet he might be on. S-41? No, too far from sector 987. Y1? No, it's a sulfuric wasteland. Wait, trees. This is... Shota's ears fell back. D-71, a Class 7 at Death World. We're both gonna die here. It was a well-known fact that Death Worlds were life-sustaining planets that couldn't develop sentient life due to the conditions of the planet forcing their life forms to focus only on survival without time nor energy for any other activity. The scale of danger grew, multiplied by 10 for every level that went up, meaning that at level 6 Death Worlder would struggle and most definitely perish on a level 7 Death World. Not even to mention me, an injured non-Death Worlder. My best chance would include me dying quickly by a local predator. With this grim reality in mind, the darts were looking more and more ideal as a preferable way to die. Shota gazed grimly out the window as he watched the Death Worlder begin to clumsily climb the branches of the tree, a clear struggle with the additional lump on its back. It must live in trees on its home planet. Is it aware how little of a chance it has to survive, even with that similarity, though? He thought. Probably not, but it's better, I guess. It may be vicious, but at least it doesn't have to suffer yet. The Death Worlder held something in one of its hands, a sharp stick in one hand. A weapon? Which seemed to inhibit its climbing as well. Its efforts were lopsided, and Shota couldn't figure out exactly why until he remembered the injury that Majoria had pointed out during the meeting. Its injury still hasn't healed, then... Thinking of his student, Shota realized he might never see any of his friends or co-workers again. Him dying on this planet was the most likely outcome to him being here, of course. He couldn't be able to tell Hisashi to shut up or teach his students again. He wouldn't be able to listen to Midoriya's mumbles or Jiro's musical calls again. He would never be able to do anything what he could on this planet again. Neither could the Death Worlder either. though Shota doubted it understand that as it seemed unconcerned, reaching a mid-level branch and starting to settle down against the trunk with the lump that was on its back deposited on one of the lower branches. It's going to spend the night near the ship. It's not done with me. Shota sighed and left the window, placing the gun within easy reaching distance as he began to dig through his admittedly limited medical supplies. He didn't have any painkillers, even near strong enough to help with the pain in his arm, but at the very least he could bandage it. But you won't live long enough for it to heal, so what's the point? Hissed his mind. I'm not going to give up. There's got to be some way for me to survive, and maybe even make sure the deathworlder does too. Shota growled back. There has to be. It was evident after a few minutes of tapping, banging, and even talking to the cat alien, because this time the cat alien he'd met had definitely furry cat face that Hitoshi could recognize belonged to his favorite animal. He wasn't even going to try to communicate. So, Hitoshi decided to settle down for the night and try again when it was eventually bright enough for him to see. Obviously sentient if he was in a spaceship, Hitoshi didn't think that cat alien was like the ones that kidnapped him. It was a different species, for one, and seemed genuinely frightened by him instead of being the type of fear when you mess up, and judging by how quickly it disappeared, it didn't want anything to do with him at the moment. At first, Hitoshi was going to lie on the ground, but remembering the incident with the other cat alien, it was armored, so maybe you could just call it Shell? He decided to climb up into one of the sturdier trees around and stay there for the night. Between the nut full of water on his back and his injured ankle and the staff in his hands, the climb was more than a little difficult, but eventually Hitoshi was able to make his way up the branches to about halfway up the tree, in an area that looked like just sturdy enough to hold him, while being far enough off the ground he didn't think anything would be able to get to him, or at least not without making a lot of noise. Although it didn't seem like it wanted him to notice, Satoshi saw the cat alien looking at him from its ship's window a couple of times, its glowing red eyes being an indicator of its presence. It seemed like a nervous creature, and Hitoshi couldn't help but wonder why. It wasn't on the ship that kidnapped him, anyway. Maybe there was some security footage? Nah, there wasn't much of a chance that a creature that had been able to get a hold of the footage from his rampage would land on the same planet, let alone the same area as him. It was more likely to just be a nervous kitty. The water nut he hooked on one of the lower branches that looked sturdy enough to hold it, and he kept his staff close as he tried to get comfortable on the branch. Unfortunately, the fear of falling prevented that entirely, and since he didn't have anything to secure himself with, he had to deal with laying across a couple of branches like a bed that was missing a few pieces. Not only was his bed uncomfortable, Hitoshi was freezing cold, and all he could do was cling his jacket close and grit his teeth. It was official. Hitoshi shouldn't have fallen asleep in that lake. Frankly, sleeping outside like this was terrifying and horrible, and Hitoshi didn't expect to get much sleep that night. That was the end of that chapter. On to the next. Chapter 9. Timber. Summary. The cat returns, and bad stuff happens. Hitoshi was right to assume he wouldn't get much sleep because he didn't get any sleep. He should have expected it anyway, considering how uncomfortable he was and how he'd already slept earlier. But still, he had hoped to be able to fade away from reality for at least a few hours. But no. His ankle felt horrible and squished from how much he'd overworked it, and his stomach clawed mercilessly at itself as it growled with vengeance. Hitoshi drew the last remaining piece of fruit from his pocket and forced himself to only nibble absently at it. Eating it would only end up with him devouring it so fast for his stomach to process. The sun was rising nice, not as colorful or as good as Earth at all, but still nice with its gentle pinks and purple lighting, clouds with its color as it peeked over the horizon. The cat alien hadn't returned to its window in a few hours, so Otoshi assumed it had fallen asleep at some point during the night. He didn't want to think about the possibility of it having died from its injuries. Or fright. Considering how nervous it had been seeing Hitoshi didn't doubt that it was one of those creatures that could die from fright, like a rabbit. As much as the idea of a cat dying from fright was unpleasant, anyway, he decided that already that since a cat alien was the only other sentient life around, then maybe it would be able to help him get somewhere with civilization. And since it was the second kind of sentient life Hitoshi had seen, he guessed there was a bunch of others in multicultural society or something like that. Or maybe even help get Hitoshi back to Earth. Why would I want to go back there? It's not like I had... Why would I want to go back there? It's not like I had anything there, whispered a piece of Hitoshi's mind. Cats. We had cats, replied Hitoshi. There are literally at least 2 cat aliens on this planet. Take your pick, sassed his mind. Hitoshi couldn't disagree with it, but still. For now, anyway, Hitoshi decided to wait until the cat alien was ready to interact with him and cooperate with him without dying from fright. Brr. Hold on. How do I make that noise? Brr. Blinked out the noise. Hitoshi blinked at the sound. Brr. It came back again. As he looked around, he spotted nothing on the surrounding branches. On the surrounding branches, it couldn't make the sound, and nothing in the surrounding area of the crash site, so he went the final option that he looked down. Oh my god, was his only initial thought as he stared at the armored alien from earlier. He decided to call it Shell, leaning against a tree and staring up at him with its pupils less yellow eyes. What are you doing here? Shrieked Hitoshi as he sat up, leaning against the trunk of the tree. What are you doing here? The shell obviously didn't reply with anything but another brrr as it kneed against the tree, staring up at Hitoshi. What are you doing here? Go away. I don't have any more fish for you. Whined Hitoshi as the shell stared at him with wide, uncomprehending eyes. I should have never fed it, thought Hitoshi. What was your alternative? Die? Replied his brain. Hitoshi couldn't argue with that logic, but didn't help with his current situation whatsoever. What do I do? Hitoshi fretted as the shell called up to him once again. Kneeling at the bark of the tree, he glanced around his tree but found nothing that he could potentially sacrifice to the shell. Aside from flat leaves, of course. Experimentally, Hitoshi picked off a couple of the leaves and tossed them down. The shell stared at them as they fell and batted at a couple as they drifted past its body, but not much more. The shell caught up once again, and this time kneading the bark of the tree much insistently than earlier. What else do I have? Hitoshi glanced down. Water! The shell's calls faltered as Hitoshi began to crawl down the branches to his water backpack and resumed once again as Hitoshi paused at the branches to unlaunch his pack from the tree. Oh my god, you're so stupid. Just climb up here if you want something from me so bad. What kind of cat can't climb anyway? Hitoshi called down to the shell, which only tilted its head at the words. Finally, Hitoshi muttered as he disconnected the pack. It was heavy, obviously, as he crawled on the trees and the shell paced around the trunk of the trees at its approach. Feast, said Hitoshi, deadpan, as he poured the water just a few branches above the shell's reach. His head split open in the face of the water and twitched between open and closed every moment, or so like a cat lapping at water from a pool. You're such a bastard. Stealing my food and water like this? Bastard. You hear that? I'm calling you bastard now. Bastard. Bastard. Bastard wiped at her, because Hitoshi decided that since Bastard has a name, he would give her a gender to call her in his head. Faced with her pause once again, Hitoshi stopped pouring water and looked up at him with wide eyes. Yes, that's you, Bastard. Bastard only opened her mouth and rubbed it against a tree before darting like a shadow back into the forest darkness. Dumb cat, muttered Hitoshi fondly, shaking his head. Just like the street cats back home. Always wanting something. Hitoshi frowned. Maybe I shouldn't be feeding the wild animals. Or at least not any others. Movement in the corner of his eyes alerted Hitoshi to the cat alien at the window again. Its red eyes focused on him. I guess I finally woke up. Then, hopefully, seeing me will help it get used to me until I can actually try communicating with it without it croaking on me and creak! His eyes left the cat alien as heavy creaking interrupted Hitoshi's train of thought. Hitoshi blinked. It didn't look like any wreckage was collapsing again, so what? Grrr. What the? Hitoshi paled, his eyes trailed to the scene above. Oh no. Shota wasn't able to sleep at all, not with the deathworlder outside, and not even when it was sleeping in the tree. He had spent most of the night trying to fall asleep and fiddling with the systems of his ship when he couldn't. Not that it did it much good. The pain in his arm was fortunately nowhere near as intense as before, thanks to what limited medical treatment he could apply to himself with the painkillers and bandages, and his arm was now set in an amurish sling. Something that would have been necessary if he was going to survive long term. Nothing he'd be able to on a death world, anyway. He didn't. Don't think like that. Don't think like that. That reminds me. How did the Death Worlder end up on this planet anyway? From the way it was rampaging through the ship, Shota doubted it was smart enough to figure a way to pilot a ship, so maybe it managed to get into an escape pod? It's possible. It's possible it was tricked into one and launched into space. Or maybe found its way into one and activated it by accident. Shota blinked. Wait, escape pods are built in survival and communication systems. If he managed to get to it, he had no idea where it was, however, and only when privy to that information would likely to the Death Worlder itself. Not that I would be aware of that, unfortunately. Should have chuffed at the thought of the Death Worlder leading him to the escape pod. Watching the Death Worlder had settled itself into one of the lower branches showed how comfortable it was in the wild. The idea of it helping him was lucrative. Ridiculous, that's what I mean. To say the least, at the very least, though, escape pods have tracking systems, so if any heroes Though escape pods have tracking systems, so if any of the heroes manage to get into the ship, the tracking systems would be the one of the few things they check, which would lead to them to D7-1. If Shota could survive until then, at least... Creak! Shota grimaced at the sound, ears twitching. Survival would much be more pleasant with everything settled. The sound of collapsing and breaking components were reminding him far too much of the past. Maybe it's for the better I wasn't able to sleep last night. The nightmares make me want to end it all before anything else does. Kirk! Sudden movement outside the window brought Shota's eyes to the Death Worlder, which was crawling down its tree faster than any climbing creature its size. What has it so? Shoda's ears fell flat as the Death Worlder ran full sprint at his ship, his eyes meeting his as it shrieked with bare teeth. Shoda stumbled back and lunged for his loaded gun. It's coming for me. Sunlight? Is it daytime? Is it a day? It's it's coming for me. Sunlight? Is it a daytime hunter? Is it more aggressive during the day? It's stronger during the day? Is it a plant? Shoda's mind was abuzz with questions and theories and fright as the Death Worlder slammed itself into the hatch and attacked with movements that made the metal creak menacingly under the pressure. It was definitely aggressive when the lights came on. Maybe light increased its volatile nature? It's getting through! He shot. He shot the moment it got through. But between his shaking arm and one parted shot, he missed, and the small Death Worlder was able to dodge easily. Its wild eyes, hunting for prey, trained on him quickly and lunged at him in a zigzag pattern that allowed for it to dodge every dart after. It ducked under the last one and reached for Shoto with a single hand, its appendages grasping. Shoto left to the side, but the Death Worlder grabbed him by the leg and pulled him close with strength more than a creature half Shoto's size would have. Wrapping its arms around him in a deadly imprisonment and sending waves of agony through Shota's body. Snap! I'm not dead yet. I'm not dead yet. Shota clawed viciously at the Death Worlder and snapped at its neck with its jaw, even wrapping a scarf around its head despite knowing its poison wouldn't work. But it was unrelenting with its grip as it ran at the door. It hasn't killed me yet. Is it going to eat me alive at its den? The Death Worlder grunted and chattered, shoving his scarf off his head as he snapped his teeth at its head, and suddenly he found himself soaring through the air. As his body instinctively rolled in the air for a harsh landing, Shoto was privy to the view of the Death Worlder leaping as a giant tree above, larger than the one the Death Worlder had rested in, fell with its bows tangled in the shattered remains of his ship, swaying, then coming down on his ship, crashing what was left of it into broken rubble.